You ever wonder why some people seem to accelerate through life while others stay stuck in the same loop? Same job, same mindset, same frustrations. Here's the unsettling truth. The real breakthroughs happen in silence. Not when you're explaining yourself, not when you're proving your worth to others, but when you're sitting quietly, doing the work no one sees. There's a reason we respond to silence biologically. The absence of noise activates the brain's default mode network, this internal world where self-awareness, introspection, and future planning live. That's not spiritual fluff. That's neuroscience. Silence is not emptiness. It's information. And those who learn to sit with it, who learn to focus inward, unlock something far more powerful than external validation. They unlock control. Now, most people spend their energy projecting outward, scrolling, comparing, explaining, defending, but the human brain wasn't designed to process 10,000 opinions a day. It was designed to scan the environment, assess threats, and refine behavior. You can't refine anything if you're too busy reacting. Every moment you spend explaining yourself is a moment stolen from adapting and evolving. Focus on yourself. That's not selfish. That's how the prefrontal cortex wires focus, long-term decision-making, and goal pursuit. Dopamine doesn't spike when someone compliments you. It spikes when you progress. And progress happens internally when no one's watching. It's in the lab at midnight. It's in the gym before sunrise. It's in choosing a book over a screen. That kind of discipline is quiet, and that's why it's misunderstood. You need to get comfortable being misunderstood, because if you are truly evolving, you will confuse the people who are not. And that's okay. Let them talk. Let them assume. Let them doubt. You don't need to defend your process. You need to trust it. See, real power doesn't make noise. Lions don't roar when they hunt. Surgeons don't yell in the operating room. The people who move the needle in this world are too focused on execution to worry about applause. The neurobiology is simple. Attention is a limited resource, and if you're spending it on opinions, gossip, or distractions, you're giving away your potential, neuron by neuron. So if you want transformation, deep, cellular level change, you don't start by shouting your goals from the rooftop. You start by building systems. You wake up at the same time every day. You eat food that fuels your cognition. You train your body because a trained body houses a disciplined mind. You do the work quietly and let the results make the noise. And when people ask, "Where have you been?" or "Why so quiet?" just smile. Because by then your actions will be loud enough. The work you did in silence will speak in volumes the world can't ignore. You know, it's fascinating. When the external world goes quiet, no notifications, no conversations, no background noise, your brain doesn't shut down. It actually lights up. Not in the usual reactive circuits we use when we're solving problems or responding to others, but in what's called the default mode network. This isn't theory, it's functional neuroscience mapped with fMRI. And what that network does is remarkable. It enables deep self-reflection, long-term vision, identity consolidation, and emotional processing. In other words, when you remove yourself from the noise, your brain starts doing the exact work that moves your life forward. But most people never access this space because silence makes them uncomfortable. They think silence is passive. It's not. It's an active neurobiological space for internal recalibration. And here's the real kicker. When you are constantly reacting to the world, chasing alerts, defending yourself, performing, you're blocking this system from activating. You're trading clarity for chaos. So when I say stay silent, I don't mean disappear. I mean enter the state where the most advanced parts of your brain can finally go to work, where you can strategize instead of just survive. Because clarity, direction, and identity, they're not found in noise. They're built in silence, neuron by neuron, in the deep architecture of your own mind. We've been conditioned to think that if something isn't being seen, it isn't valuable. But that's a psychological trap, and worse, it's a physiological misfire. You see, the dopamine system in your brain, the same one that drives motivation and reinforces behavior, isn't built to respond to attention. It's built to respond to progress. And progress, real, sustainable, identity-shifting progress, rarely happens in public view. In fact, the moment you start announcing every move you're making, you dilute your own neurochemical drive. Studies show that prematurely sharing your goals gives your brain a false sense of completion. You feel like you've done something just because you've said it, but the truth is, nothing's been built yet. You haven't changed your biology, your habits, or your outcomes. You've just burned fuel on perception. That's why the work done in silence matters more than anything else. It's the 5 a.m. wake-ups when no one knows you're grinding. It's the hard choices when no one's applauding. It's the rewiring of neural pathways through repetition, intention, and consistency without any external reward. That's where transformation happens. That's when your nervous system starts recognizing a new version of you, not because the world clapped, but because you showed up anyway, consistently, quietly, relentlessly. So if you're not being seen right now, don't mistake that for failure. It might be the greatest advantage you have, because in the shadows, without the pressure of performance, you're free to evolve without interference. And when that internal shift becomes undeniable, it won't need to be announced. The world will notice when it's ready. So, there's something most people never fully grasp. Your attention is a biologically limited resource, not metaphorically, literally. You only have so much attentional bandwidth in a given day, and once it's gone, it's gone. Neurotransmitters like acetylcholine and norepinephrine, these are the molecules that direct your focus. They don't operate on an infinite supply. And every time you let yourself get pulled into a meaningless argument, scroll through junk content, or chase external drama, you're spending that precious neurochemical fuel. Think of it like this. Every distraction you give into is a withdrawal from your cognitive energy reserves. And those reserves are what you need to build something meaningful, to develop a skill, to solve a hard problem, to regulate your emotions under pressure. That kind of mental work takes serious neural resources. But if you've scattered your attention across dozens of micro distractions throughout the day, there's nothing left in the tank for the things that actually matter. One of the biggest misconceptions people carry, without even realizing it, is the belief that their motivation should come from being seen, recognized, or praised. But that's not how your brain actually works. Dopamine, the molecule most responsible for drive and motivation, doesn't spike when someone compliments you. It spikes when you make measurable progress toward a goal. That's a crucial distinction. You're not wired for applause, you're wired for evolution. This is where it gets really interesting. The striatum, a deep brain structure involved in the dopamine pathway, responds far more powerfully to internal milestones than external validation. So when you complete a hard workout, hit a deep focus session, or stick to your plan when it would have been easier to quit, your brain gives you a chemical reward. But when you post about your effort and get 100 likes, that's novelty. It's not sustainable. And worse, it can become addictive in all the wrong ways. So if you're depending on recognition to keep going, you're setting yourself up for a crash. Because recognition is inconsistent. It's based on algorithms, moods, trends, things you can't control. But your behavior, your systems, the small wins no one sees, you can control those. And when you do consistently, you start to shift your baseline level of motivation. This is neuroplasticity in real time, training your brain to associate pleasure with discipline instead of distraction. That's not just mental strength, that's a rewired reward system. And once that clicks, you stop needing the world to tell you you're doing okay. You know you are, because your biology confirms it every time you show up for yourself. There's a psychological and biological cost to growth that almost no one talks about: being misunderstood. And here's why. When your behavior starts to shift, when your habits tighten, when you say no to things you used to say yes to, your nervous system begins reorganizing itself around a new identity. That's not symbolic. It's literal. Synaptic pruning, neural rewiring, changes in dopaminergic tone. You're not just thinking differently, you're becoming different at a structural level. But the world around you doesn't update that quickly. People still see the older version of you, the version they're comfortable with, the one that fit their narrative. And when you stop matching that version, they'll resist. They may question you, joke about the changes, or even try to pull you back to baseline. That's not always malicious. It's just how social networks stabilize themselves. From a neuroscience standpoint, humans regulate one another's behavior to reduce uncertainty. So when you introduce change, especially quiet, deliberate change, it creates friction. This is where most people break. They try to explain themselves. They over-justify. They dilute their process just to be understood. But if you're serious about evolving, you have to tolerate that friction. You have to become neurologically resilient to disapproval. Because the moment you start bending your behavior for comfort or clarity, you lose the very thing that was transforming you. And the paradox is, the more aligned you become with your future self, the less understood you'll be by your past circle. That's a sign you're on the right path. Growth isn't always loud or inspiring. It's often isolating, disorienting, and invisible. But the brain adapts, and eventually you stop needing to be understood because the clarity you were looking for from others starts coming from within. There's a phenomenon in behavioral neuroscience called action-oriented identity consolidation, and it explains something most people overlook. The most powerful individuals, the ones who actually change the trajectory of their lives and influence the world around them, don't spend their time talking about what they're going to do. They do it. And in doing it, they rewire their sense of self through behavior, not through verbal affirmation. See, the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for decision-making, long-term planning, and impulse control, doesn't care what you say you're about. It only responds to what you consistently act on. And every time you execute on a behavior that aligns with your goals, you strengthen the neural identity around that action. But the reverse is also true. If you keep saying you're focused, driven, or disciplined, but your actions don't reflect that, your brain detects the mismatch. Over time, that creates internal dissonance, mental fatigue, emotional confusion, even reduced motivation. This is why actions speak louder than words, because the brain only codes for what's real. And when someone is truly focused on building something, whether it's a skill, a body, a business, or a new version of themselves, they don't waste precious cognitive bandwidth broadcasting every move. Their reward system has already shifted. They get dopamine from execution, not expression. And here's where it gets tactical. Silence becomes a tool, not because you're hiding, but because you're preserving attention for what matters. You're not seeking applause, you're managing energy. You're creating internal coherence where your behavior, identity, and goals are neurologically aligned, and when that happens, results become inevitable. They don't need to be advertised because the quality of the output speaks for itself. When most people think about change, they obsess over outcomes. They fixate on the goal, lose the weight, launch the project, earn the promotion. But here's what behavioral neuroscience makes absolutely clear. Goals don't change your brain. Systems do. The brain's plasticity, its ability to rewire and adapt, doesn't respond to intention. It responds to repetition, to pattern, to structure. So if you're waking up every day hoping that motivation will carry you through, you're already behind. Motivation is unreliable. It fluctuates based on sleep, blood glucose, cortisol levels, things you often can't fully control. But systems, those are controllable. When you build a structure around your day, a defined wake time, a protocol for exercise, dedicated blocks for deep work, you create a scaffolding that supports consistent neurochemical and behavioral outcomes, regardless of how you feel. There's a deep connection between the state of your body and the state of your mind, and it's not just philosophical, it's biological. One of the most underappreciated truths in neuroscience is that a trained body creates the ideal internal environment for a disciplined mind. This isn't about aesthetics, it's about regulation. When you train physically, when you engage in resistance training, zone 2 cardio, deliberate cold exposure, or even just consistent movement, you're not just building muscle or endurance, you're stabilizing your neurochemistry. Movement increases levels of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF, which enhances neuroplasticity. It elevates dopamine and serotonin in ways that are more sustainable than any external reward. It improves vagal tone, which regulates your parasympathetic nervous system, meaning you recover faster from stress, you stay calmer under pressure, and your ability to make clear decisions improves dramatically. What this creates is a feedback loop. You move, your brain becomes more adaptable. You adapt, your behavior becomes more intentional. You stay consistent, and suddenly your identity shifts, not because you forced it, but because your biology made it easier to follow through. And here's the nuance most people miss. Discipline doesn't start in the mind. It's embodied. It starts with how you breathe, how you sleep, how you fuel, how you move. When you stop treating the body and mind as separate, you unlock exponential progress. You begin to realize that physical training isn't a luxury or a side habit. It's the foundational protocol for mental focus, emotional stability, and long-term behavioral change. And once your nervous system gets a taste of that alignment, where your physical and mental energy are working together, it becomes very hard to go back to chaos. Most people underestimate the power of silence in training mental fortitude. It's not just about quieting external noise. It's about building the ability to be comfortable with your own thoughts, to sit with discomfort, to process emotions without reacting. This is essential because our brain's ability to stay calm and focused is directly tied to our capacity to handle internal states of discomfort without distraction. In today's world, most people are terrified of silence because silence often forces them to face the chaos within themselves. And yet, this is where true mental strength is built. You see, the brain thrives on challenge, but only when it's given the proper environment to process and adapt. When you constantly distract yourself, whether through social media, endless chatter, or unnecessary multitasking, you're depriving your brain of the very thing it needs to grow, the time and space to regulate. The more you can train yourself to sit in stillness, the more you strengthen the circuits that manage emotional resilience and cognitive clarity. And these circuits don't just appear overnight, they're built over time through deliberate practice. The brain's prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for focus, decision-making, and emotional regulation, becomes stronger when it's forced to sit through discomfort without seeking immediate gratification. When you're in silence, your brain learns to tolerate boredom, to plan instead of react, and to process emotions without acting on them. This is mental fortitude. It's not about being unshakable all the time. It's about having the capacity to return to clarity even in the midst of discomfort. Training in silence means training your nervous system to be less reactive, less dependent on external validation, and more capable of responding with intentionality. The more you expose yourself to this, the better you get at it. Your brain becomes more accustomed to the discomfort of pause, and from that, you develop an incredible level of focus. You learn that peace isn't passive. It's an active, disciplined state that allows you to access higher level cognitive functions like strategic thinking and long-term planning. So the next time you feel uncomfortable in silence, don't fill it with noise. Recognize it as an opportunity to train, because true mental strength is not about avoiding discomfort. It's about building the ability to sit through it and come out stronger on the other side. You have to understand something fundamental. You don't owe anyone an explanation about your process. This is a tough pill for many people to swallow because society conditions us to seek approval, validation, and external recognition. But here's the neuroscience. When you seek external validation, you're tapping into a reward system that's fleeting, unreliable, and largely out of your control. You can't predict when someone will recognize your efforts, nor can you control how they'll perceive your journey. And that uncertainty, it drains your energy, it diminishes your focus. The truth is, if you're busy explaining yourself, you're diluting your own energy. You're telling your brain that the outcome is tied to how others perceive your actions, rather than how you experience your progress. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that regulates higher level functions like planning and goal setting, works best when it's internally motivated. When you are driven by your own sense of purpose and not by the need to explain why you're doing something, you conserve energy that would otherwise be spent in pursuit of approval. When you commit to your process without the need to explain it, something incredible happens. You create autonomy. Your focus sharpens, your confidence grows, and your actions become more decisive because you're no longer dependent on others to affirm your worth. This shifts the balance of power back into your hands. You stop waiting for the world to catch up with your goals. Instead, you start building them regardless of whether anyone else understands. And this is where true freedom comes from. Freedom from the need to perform for others and freedom to create at your own pace.